Hello, 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 everyone, and you are welcome to season 4 of my Take Chat show. Woo, 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 woo. Gosh, I can't believe it. When we started off, it was like, okay, let's do this. A couple of friends and I, let's have some conversation, talk about life issues. And now here we are, uh, 4 seasons later, and we keep
Mm.
having more and more issues for us to talk about. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Adenike Ezra, and I'm really glad to be here. With me today are some of my girlfriends who are part of my take show, but we also have some new guests with us. So I'll first of all let the ladies introduce themselves, starting with Tilson. Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay. Well, first of all, I know Tosi is excited. I think there might be a little bit of an audio issue, but I'm very sure we'll be able to hear back when she joins in. And then also from yourself, Lola.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lola Ogotomilade. I'm so happy to be here in the fourth season of my Take Talk Show.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, like I said before, we have very special guests on our show to discuss the topics today. I'd like to first of all just say a quick word about one of our guests, Dr. Zion Ekundare. Dr. Zion is a transformational specialist, psychotherapist, executive life coach, and a mentor who is passionate about helping people understanding the choices available to them and leveraging their insights these insights to achieve empowered, congruent, and fulfilled lives. She's a retired medical doctor and holds an MSc in rational, emotive, and cognitive behavior therapy. And she's a registered member of the British Association of Counselors and Psychotherapists, as well as the Association of Christian Counselors. It's an honor to have you, Dr. Zion. Can you say a quick hello to everyone?
Hello, everybody. It's an absolute delight to be with you this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to getting to know all my ladies and I guess getting to, yeah, just having a great time this afternoon.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Also in the house with us on today's show is Dr. Esther Nandi. Dr. Esther is a doctor and a philanthropist who has dedicated her life to helping those in need. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Esther has been serving as a general practitioner working in the United Kingdom in primary care with a special interest in women's health. Now, beyond her practice at home, her passion for giving back has led her to expand her reach throughout the world. She's now enhancing the lives of individuals and families across the globe with a strong focus on Africa, where she and her team are providing transformative opportunities for those in need. She's married to Pastor Patrick Nandi, and they both pastor Pillar of Fire Ministries based in the UK. Dr. Esther, thanks for being here. Say a quick hello to everyone.
Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for inviting me, Adenike. It's such an honor to be on your show. And yeah, let's roll.
Let's kick it up. Let's roll.
Mhm.
Let's roll. Today's topic, and actually, this series is this uh, why am I losing my thought? This new series that we're doing, this new season is when life happens. And really, we
Mm.
want to just talk about the situations and the things that happen to us as women of faith, as men of faith, when we expect certain things not to go the way they go, but it happens that way. And how do we really address it and how do we develop the skills? So today we're going to be talking about the impact of stress on the mind and the body. And the reason why we do this on my take is because this is a place for us to hang out. We unwind, we chat, we talk about the things that are happening around us in my take. So we really want everyone to participate. Thank you for those logging in. If you're logged in right now, please feel free to encourage people to join. Our goal is to promote a culture of love and compassion, as well as truth and candidness. So, on today's show, we want to have a real and open conversation on the impact of stress on our mind and on our body. I'm sure most of us know that there's so much that's going on around us that I feel it's literally just impacted by the things that we go through. So I'm curious to maybe just to get some of your initial thoughts, Lola, when we talk about this topic. We talk sometimes as a working mom, sometimes, or it could be as a, for some people as a single woman. Our lives are so busy, but
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about sometimes do you feel there's a correlation between how life is today, and even the sort of things that we find ourselves dealing with when it comes to stress on our bodies.
Yeah, thanks, Mika. So I can kind of speak to it on a personal level, because I, as many of you, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I work full time. And because of that, just those things alone are enough to, the stress associated with just being functioning in those different roles. Now, doing that in an environment where there's stress externally, whether it's through the environment, environmental factors, whether it's through, what you listen to in the news, what's happening in society, what you're constantly being fed. When you turn on your TV, and you turn on the news and all the things you hear, it has a real impact on the body. And I was just, looking this morning at some of the statistics, because I'm also a public health. I have a master's in public health and I work in the public health field. So just looking at it, as it's really become a public health issue as well, particularly in the last 3 years. We have American Institute of Stress Statistics here in the US, and it says about 33% of people report feeling extreme stress. 77% of those people experience stress that affects their physical health. So it has impact on our physical health as well as our mental health. And then medical research estimates that as much as 90% of illnesses and diseases are stress related. So, I can't talk about what if the physiological effects it has on stress. We have our doctors here on the body, but I do know behaviorally, when you undergo stress, when you're going through stress, your behavior changes, your behavior towards your health, like what you eat, how you sleep, your habits, the things you do. Is impacted by stress, and ultimately that affects your physical body. So I think that a lot of people, women and men, can testify that, particularly with COVID and the aftermath of COVID, that the stress levels have gone up quite significantly. And so we've gotten to the point now where we have to start thinking strategically about how we can deal with stress.
Absolutely, Lola. And I think, thank you so much. You framed that perfectly, because those statistics, and this is from 3 years ago, we know things have even gone worse. So maybe I should start asking Dr. Zion that, when we say from a mental health perspective, and it will be interesting when I hear from, Dr. Esther, what is stress? And then when I was doing my research, I also realized that, some people would say, well, a level of stress is good for the body, blah, blah, blah. But then they talk about chronic stress. So from both your perspectives, I'd like to learn, when we talk about stress, what is it? And what is chronic stress?
What's the easiest way of defining stress? Stress is, as you said, there's good stress and there's bad stress. Stress is, I guess, for me, would be anything that shifts you out of your comfort zone in the simplest possible words. So you're taken out of where you're comfortable and you're now getting into areas where you're not comfortable. So let me try and make that a bit more practical. So, a lot of us, how do I explain this? Stress is, I guess it's part of it's inbuilt into our bodies. And the whole idea of stress is that it's meant to help us. You take you out of your comfortable area, moves you into an area where you're not, comfortable. And I don't really want to go into Dr. Esther's area where, systems in your body kicking to help you to cope. But of course, the pressures of life, anything that will push you out of where you're comfortable. Okay, let me make it even easier. Say, for example, you have a task to do. You do the task. Maybe you're tired because, as you say, all the different things that are going on in your life have pushed you into an area where you're out of your comfort zone. And then the ideal thing you should do is step back, relax, regroup, reconfigure yourself, but you keep going and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going until you get into an area where you're totally out of your depth. And that's when we'll say that, okay, now you are stressed out. And obviously with everything that goes on with life, even if it's just the fact that we juggle so many things, juggle work, juggle, powerful jobs, very stressful jobs, we juggle families, we juggle so many things, we juggle church responsibilities. Those are all the things that can push us out of our normal comfortable area and push us into things that into areas where we're not comfortable.
Amazing. I think I really loved that, the way you try to simplify it. When you shift from what is in your regular, way of operating, and you start to operate outside of your regular boundaries. I like it, because for me, it helps me understand actually not just stress, but how it builds up. Dr. Esther, maybe you can also then tell us a bit more on exactly what is chronic stress. So this whole definition, when does it become chronic if it's building up?
Like Dr. Zion said, I mean, when one is constantly in a state in which the person is always out of their comfort zones, or the areas where they would normally operate in, that's when the person is under a chronic stressful situation. Like the acute stress it happens one-off, but the chronic one is every day, the everyday grind of life. And especially nowadays, when I want to give, for instance, in the UK, the cost of living crisis, people are having to work longer hours. If before you used to work probably just 6 hours and you could get by on 6 hours, a day for your work, and now you have to work like 8 hours, you have to work longer, or even 9 hours. You have to do longer and longer hours. So you're putting more physical stress on your own body, more mental stress on yourself as well. And even just, okay, you have to juggle the bills. Oh, this bill is coming, you haven't paid that one, you haven't paid this one, this letter is coming. So all those things pile up as well. So there's a chronic stress on the person. And then when you now have added to it, probably a marital issue, added to it now a child issue. So your different areas of your life are not working as you like. And then that's what I think can cause this kind of chronic stress.
You make a fantastic point when you were saying that, because I'm sure most of our audience, and thank you, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone that has tuned in to my take. Please note that you can, add your comments. We're talking about today the impact of stress on the mind and on the body. And, one of the things that's really driving that is, the fact that there's so much, the uptake of sickness, of disease that we're finding. I'm learning that most of it is not really from the external. It's our body and the stress on our body that is potentially leading to it. So the life that most people are having to live with because of what's going on right now, it's impacting us. And so we really want to be able to address that. And thank you. I can see that a few people have joined. We're going to be taking your comments. Thank you for putting your comments in there. If there's anything we've said you agree with, or you have questions, we have two amazing doctors in the house. So it's a great opportunity also for any of our guests. If you have a question you want to put out there, that would be great. So I just want to quickly then say, now that we've sort of talked about, what is stress, what leads to stress, what is chronic stress, let's take it deeper and let us be a bit more specific, because a lot of people don't understand when stress is occurring, right, in their lives. They think it's just, maybe I'm just having a difficult time. I'm just having a tough time. How are you? Things are so busy. I'm so overwhelmed. We use those phrases, but we might not realize that at that point we're under stress. So Dr. Zion, can I ask you, what happens to the mind when it is under stress? That's the first question. And then also, what type of, I'd like to know, when you break that down, what are some diagnoses, what are some words and some phrases that, people may not be sensitive to it, but that's what's happening. I feel that we're so resilient, we just go on with stuff. Yeah. But I want us to really narrow in. So can you just break down, when the body starts to go, when we start to experience stress, what happens to our minds?
I think I love the way you've tossed the word resilience in there, which is a word that a lot of us roll with. And I mean, I know I used to say for myself, we overuse, we overstretch our resilience, So if I'm going to paint a picture, say for example, I mean, I learned that, that when people play the violin or when they play the guitar, that when they're using the guitar, the strings are taut and tight so that they can use them to play the sound that they want. But when they are not playing their guitar, they loosen their strings. So the strings aren't under pressure all the time. They're not tense all the time. And then maybe if I move it into the realm of maybe like an elastic band, the elastic band functions when You stretch it when you need it, and you allow it to go back to its normal state, its resting state when you're not using it. But for a lot of us, we stretch. We don't allow ourselves to go back to, certainly not back to the resting state. And we take on a little bit more because we're resilient and because we feel that, yes, we're super women. Yes, everybody does it. I can do it. I did it, Yes, everybody around me seems to be coping, even though we're all, we're all struggling. As they say, most of us we're like ducks or like swan. We sit on the surface of the water. Everybody sees us looking serene and calm. Our makeup is on point, our wigs are on point, but we're paddling furiously under. There's a lot of activity that nobody can see. And I'm sure Dr. Esther will tell us all our body systems are in absolute chaos. But in the mind, our minds are racing away, and people don't understand that that's what's happening with us. So what happens as we get increasingly under stress? For a lot of people, our anxiety levels peak. We just become in a state where we're just in a state of, hypersensitive to anxiety. We can't let go of the anxiety. There's always something buzzing. And I'm sure all of us can relate to it when we have a deadline at work and you want to sleep, but your mind is just raging on. And I'm not even, before I even go into the reality of stress and life, I'm just going to take us to something that we all do, our mobile phones, the way our mobile phones just don't allow us to rest our minds. There's always one thing or the other that we're. So we don't actually allow our minds to rest. There's always one problem going on. As we said, there's so many challenges going on in the world today. There's just too much. We're constantly bombarded with a lot of activity. Our minds are just racing all the time. So I think the easiest one is anxiety. But it spills into so many other things. People get depressed because they get overwhelmed with everything that's going on. People find that they start they start second guessing themselves because they're like, can I not? We start losing our confidence. Sleep goes out of the window because the anxiety is too much. We find that people who are friendly, suddenly they're not as friendly as they used to be. Everything starts going inwards. We start becoming internally focused rather than externally focused. And it just goes on and on and on. It's like when does a rolling rock? It just keeps gathering moss and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, I think I
And what are some of the diagnoses from your practice, from your experience? I know that especially in our community, and I might be wrong, but if when people have a diagnosis, they tend to think something seriously, but they feel a lot of people don't go in don't have a therapist, or may not necessarily think they need to go in for counseling. But at some point, when is this stress impacting the mind? When does it become a mental health issue? And mental health issues, sometimes we say it like it's a negative thing, like you're breaking down. But sometimes, when is it healthy for someone to say, I really need to speak to a therapist? My marriage might be going well, but but maybe I just don't feel I'm communicating well with my children, and I'm really concerned about how well they're doing. When do you know when to go speak to somebody about these things beyond just, I spoke to my girlfriend? I guess there's some therapy in that, or I prayed about it. Yes, there's a lot of therapy in that. But when do you feel people should really start looking at this from a diagnostic, let me get some professional support in this area?
I thank you, because you've touched on something. You've touched on another very big thing. There's a huge stigma out there to do with things to do with mental health, and probably that's one of the biggest things that I try to spend a lot of my time doing, is to keep trying to teach people that mental health is just like physical health. There's no taboo to it. There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody has a mental health. Now, whether it's optimal or it's below par or it's subpar or it's, everybody has it. So it's not something to worry about. But because, society, until very recently, it wasn't really acceptable to admit that you had problems in your mind, people just tend to keep going. They don't, until something, a major catastrophe happens. Most people don't admit to having challenges. It's when they have a meltdown that a friend usually tells them, you need to seek help. a dear friend, or, I've had people who told me that their children looked at them and said, Mom, you need to seek help. Now, you're really out of control now. Some people, it's their husbands, their wives, somebody who makes them, but it's very rare. Sometimes you have it, but it's very rare when you find an individual who says, right, I need help. It's because they've had a meltdown at work or something, and they've thought, how did I get here? That's what tends to get people looking, getting up and trying to get help.
Yes.
But, yeah.
It should be accessed much more frequently. Probably from what you're saying, Dr. Zion, is this should be something that it's a tool like our healthcare, that we just constantly have somebody outside of our regular circle that we can just speak to on issues that could have that independent view. I really like that. And I think I'll flip over to Dr. Esther and say, okay, let me take that to the human body. What goes on in the human body when it's going through long-term stress or chronic stress? I love when you said there's acute stress and there's chronic stress. What happens, and what are some of the medical diagnoses that I as well?
I mean, basically, when the body is going through chronic stress, it can affect nearly every system of the body. I think I'll just deal with the common ones because of time reasons. The common ones that I have come in contact with is like headaches. People can just come up to the surgery or come to the doctors complaining of headaches. You do all the scans, you can't find anything going on, and then I start probing. You discover that there's a problem going on in the marriage, or there's something in the background. Headaches, dizziness, palpitations, that's for the cardiovascular, palpitations, chest pains as well, neck pains, all in fact, generalized body pains. It's very common in especially some ethnic groups. The women, they're chronically stressed, so they can basically start having body pains. You do all sorts of therapy, x-rays, you can't find anything. But generalized body pains in the neck, body pains in the shoulders, arms, wrists, name it, the people complain about everything. And just like Mutupe said, like insomnia as well, people can't sleep in the night. That can also be a manifestation of stress, and also excessive sleepiness. Some people make themselves sleep because they want to run away from it all. Eating, some people stop eating, they lose weight, and some people start gaining too much because they compensate by comfort eating. So those are the common which I think of, but there's so many other ones. The whole body can be affected. Hypertension, diabetes as well it can be as a result of long-term stress on the body.
That is quite interesting. But I was trying to see if I could find that article, but I don't know if anybody else saw it. I saw something that said research is starting to show that there's a certain level of cancer that's showing up because of long-term sadness. And I wanted to pull it. Unfortunately, I couldn't, and I tried, but it was one of those, and it came out of, that a lot of people are keeping in a lot of emotions. The people are not, there's no outlet. And in some cases, it's literally affecting the cells of the body. And if I think back as to, just even from a creative perspective and my understanding of, how our bodies were created to function, and some of the things pushing down on it. You've said a lot, but can we sort of dive into a little bit, and maybe I'll let Dr. Esther, just as you continue with this, talk about what sort of chronic sickness that can, that can come from it, because we've talked, it could be, stress coming from broken relationships, not being able to manage, or people going through a divorce, going through life changes like that can be very stressful. Having a new baby, when I was going through certain things, having a new baby, what should be very exciting for a family sometimes is one of the most stressful periods, because as wonderful as it is, it could have different things, lack of sleep, financial impact, people go into postpartum depression, so, and challenges with teenagers. So, Dr. S, I just wanted to say that when you said something I like, you start to probe. Can you tell us, apart from pain, are there things that are secreted? Are there things that, just the hormonal changes for both men and women? I know you specialize in women's health, but I was wondering if you could take us into things that you might think it's pain, but deeper things going on in the body. And like Dr. Zion said, or going on in the mind. and we don't
Yes.
see that it's impacting us and could lead to long-term disease.
Well, there are hormonal changes which are quite complex. So there's a hormone called cortisol. So that cortisol is a stress hormone. So when it's secreted, it can cause excessive glucose in the body. And when there's excess glucose in your bloodstream, that alone can make your immunity to get lowered. And there is some kind of interplay between developing um, the excessive glucose and also lowered immunity. And there's an interplay between lowered immunity and developing cancer. It is quite complex, but it is known to be there. So people can develop, these kind of illnesses because of these hormonal pathways, which are very, very complex, extremely complex, things going on in the background.
I think it's quite interesting that you say that, because I'm also curious about how this manifests differently in children versus adult female or adult male. I remember a couple of years ago, my then elementary school daughter, she kept complaining about stomach pain, stomach pain, stomach pain, stomach pain. And we took her to the doctor. They did all sorts of tests, x-ray, this and that, and blood tests and everything. And everything came back normal, normal, normal. And after a while, the pediatrician called me to the side and said, "Is she going through stress in school?" And I was like, in fact, I was insulted when she asked that, because I immediately thought, was she saying that my daughter has a mental issue or something? But that's how we actually found out that she was going through bullying situation in school. Through this, she wasn't saying that she was
Physical
going through this.
manifestation.
It was a physical symptom that she was complaining about to us. And that physical, and trying to go figure out the physical thing, is what now led conversations around, okay, are you going through stress in school, and what's causing it and stuff like that. So we were able to address it. And I found out now that when we changed her school and she's in a different situation and where she has more control and is happier, no more stomach pain. No, like she hasn't complained. I just observed that she hasn't complained about this thing, and we didn't do anything different that, like physically. So it makes me curious as to how does this sometimes manifest in children, because sometimes children can't always articulate or pinpoint that it's stress, right? And I would say also the same thing for men. Men are reluctant to say, "I'm going through stress." Women, we say it all the time. "You're stressing me. I'm stressed." You're stressed. I don't think we have problems expressing our emotional thing. But men, I don't think, are able to say very readily,
That's
"I'm
true.
stressed." And that is why I'm acting a certain way. So what do you think, like on the emotional, mental side or on the physical side, are some of the things we can look for, or, that can say, oh, maybe this thing is stress, and then we need to deal with it a different way? Just your thoughts on that, whether it's physically or emotional, mental, either one. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay. Over to you, Dr. Zion.
Okay. Okay. Where do I start with this now? I think, as you say, you're very right. Men don't talk about stress. That's why we found out that the most, the highest, second to the highest group of cohort of people who commit suicide are men between the ages of, I think it's about 30 and 50, because they are the ones that are at the peak of life, the peak of their work life, their careers and everything. And when they're anxious or when their minds aren't working well, they don't seek for help. So they find a nice violent way and they, end it all. You're absolutely from there. Of course, we all know about children too. What you said is the same. The stomach aches, I feel sick. They come to reasons why they don't want to do what they're supposed to do. With women, as you say, women will talk, but everybody else, even when they don't talk, everybody else around them will notice. But if I just backpedal a bit, I was talking about, we were talking about the natural response to stress in the human body. I'm sure we all know about the fight or flight reaction.
Yes.
We have a challenge, we experience something that is different, and our bodies our mind, our eyes see the stress, or something perceives that danger is coming, our heart rate spikes up, blood gets diverted all over our body so that we can actually either run away or
Mm.
fight. So, the muscles, whatever is needed to respond
Yeah.
to that acute situation gets increased. So, for example, you are about to step into the road and you suddenly look up and you just realize that you didn't realize, but a bus is about to hit you. You can imagine what goes through your body at that time. That is extreme stress, isn't it?
Mm.
Yes.
Now, when we have chronic stress like that, you can imagine that happening consistently. As Dr. Esther said, the cortisol churning, all the hormones totally out of whack. Imagine a time when this is, sustained for a long period of time. Whereas the normal, stress response would be a few minutes and then you're back to normal. Everything goes back to normal and your body enters a kind of resting stage. But when it's sustained like that, this body is just a wonderfully created organism. Everything works, everything has a way, everything is just beautifully balanced. So the truth is that once something is out of whack, it can pop up anywhere, really. And so that's why it's true exactly what Dr. Esther said, that a person will come and they may just be complaining about something that just doesn't make sense. You're running all the tests and it just doesn't make sense. Somebody's saying they have a tummy ache. How can you have a tummy ache every day? Watch your diet, you're watching you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you're resting well. Again, we watch out for statements that people make. Statements like, I'm tired. When someone's saying I'm busy, their friends notice that I'm now moving into the mental side of it. Suddenly, all your friends that used to see you, nobody sees you anymore. You're always tired. You're always busy. You're always overworked. Something isn't right. You're doing too much. You're taking on too much. The elastic band is being stretched and you're not allowing it to relax. I remember I was reading somewhere where they said something about a man was giving a story and he said, there was a man who was chopping wood with an axe. And as he chopping, the axe started getting blunt. But he kept chopping. And then someone told him, said, why don't you stop and sharpen this axe a bit? But he wasn't listening. He just wanted to finish what he was doing. So he kept chopping. So of course it took him much longer. He didn't chop as effectively and efficiently as he could have if he had just listened. That's the way a lot of us are with stress. We find that we're feeling, even when we recognize the fact that we are stressed, it doesn't somehow, I don't know what it is about the mind that doesn't allow us to say, okay, I'm stressed, let me step away from this. We keep going, we keep going. So, chronic stress can, in fact, when we have a breakdown, maybe even when we have, we find we can't sleep, it's probably a blessing in disguise. It's like the Lord has stepped in and said, enough.
You have to, yes.
Something has to be. Because as long as we can cope, virtually all of us will keep going.
Especially women, I feel like. And I think also like the cultural aspect, like there's a question that, someone said, put in the chat, that I was raised to believe that stress is part of life and you learn to deal with that. Is that a wrong mindset? And I just had this conversation with my firstborn daughter, who's a type A overachiever, people pleaser, that kind of, I must, and she always says it's our fault because, she's the, child of, we're not immigrant parents, but, African parents, like the expectation, we're the ones that put that expectation on her that she has to meet that expectation. She's like, taking all these credits. She's a university student, taking all these credits in school. She's in these clubs. She's working like 2 jobs. She's saying and even me as a mom, I'm like, you need to slow down.
Slow down.
Handle all of this stuff. Oh, I got it. But then I realized that even though she's going and going and going, and physically it appears that she's handling things, is more irritable. Like you said, she's like, snapping at people, like, her tolerance level has gone down, on certain, during those times when now she's, fine. But so sometimes I feel like culturally we place these like expectations on people and they think that they're superhuman, that they can handle this, especially women, I think.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah. And I think maybe just, I know, and I love the direction this is taking, especially, just seeing it in play out. Van B, thank you, said, I recently experienced what I was told was an anxiety attack. I thought it was a heart attack.
Mm,
Never thought I would
mm,
experience such a thing, also not at my age, but I thank Jesus, my healer.
Mhm.
Thanks, Van B. But I also remembered the way she said it, the day somebody, a friend of mine, wrote something on Facebook, and she actually, it was a similar story. She thought she was having a heart attack.
Mm.
So that was the
mm,
first time when she broke it down. She actually talked about it, and that's when I realized panic attacks are actually as strong
yeah.
attacks. She couldn't drive. I said she had to park on the side of the road. She thought she was
Mm,
dying. She was so terrified.
Mhm.
And
mm,
then towards the end of
mm,
last year, a couple of us, just me, Lola, and the rest of the ladies, we had about three stories. Somebody's, they went to dinner, got back home, spouse, maybe another part of the room, was wondering, where have you been? I haven't heard from you. Got into the room, slump, died. Just like we had about three stories
mm,
towards the end of last year of people going and I know there might be other health connection issues, but somebody said there's a reason why stress is called the silent killer.
Mhm.
mm,
And so, not to be morbid, but I just wanted to really say right now that for anybody who is going through a stressful time during this period, we've given different examples, but can we really break it down, be very practical? um what do we do? I mean, Lola gave some amazing examples, in terms of the family. I think it was offline when Dr. Zion and I were talking, and I was telling her how I remember the particular period of time when, I was working in a particular role and there was a project and it had such senior level visibility that the politics behind it really made it very pressurized. So you find out that I was working extra long hours and the rest of it. At
mm,
one point, like you said, God delivered me from it, in a very interesting way. But I then noticed that I ended up with one or two medical diagnoses. That, thank God, I was being put on interesting medications. Medication is bringing other reactions. I said there must be a problem here. So I literally stopped, prayerfully found somebody to help me work on, my health, my exercise, thinking. I went back to the basics, meditating the word, and thank God, after a while,
mm.
last time I went, I took all of the test results, and the doctor was like, "You're fine."
Okay, very
But
good.
I do remember that diagnosis, when I said, "What causes it?" It's a very acute, serious diagnosis, but he said,
Mm,
"Don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what causes it. We don't know what will cause one cell to fight against another cell." So there
Mhm.
are things that doctors can't tell. But I knew in my
that's true.
heart it was because of the stress I was going through.
Very true.
I stayed on those medications. They were starting to have effects in other part of the bodies. So I'm not absolutely speaking against using medications. I'm not absolutely speaking
Mm,
against. I feel there's a place where we need to sometimes stop and
listen.
realize that some medications are palliative. They're just dealing with symptoms. We need to go to the root of it. And so where this is playing out now in the lives of people listening or will listen afterwards, let me start with, maybe let me start with Dr. Esther, let's talk about the body, and then Dr. Zion, let's talk about the mind. And Dr. Zion, when you're talking about the mind, I want you to also address fear. I just thought about it now. I feel that that is a major one. But Dr. Esther, please, what would you
Mhm,
say? You're a medical doctor. We're in your surgery today,
mhm.
and there's all sorts of stress that's going. Things that you would say we need to start doing straight away.
Well, I mean, so many times, I mean, I've even advised people to change their job. I remember there was one time did some work in Canary Wharf area, and I saw a lot of young boys coming in to a handsome young boys that worked in the
Mhm.
banking, and they were totally, you know, not well, and they were complaining about the workload and so on. I said, please, you have to think about either if they don't want you to reduce your hours, you have to find another job. So sometimes you may have to, actually, you know, leave that situation and, look for another job, practical wise. Some things are more difficult, like emotional, or I mean, in terms of relationships, family relationship. It's difficult to actually just jump out of a marriage, but that may be another way out for some people. If the stress is too much in the marriage, then they may need to prayerfully consider separating for that season, and also to Now, just like what you said, try to slow down in your schedule. Slow down in our schedule. Don't take on too much. Try and drop what you can drop, and also start exercising. Exercising, going for walks every day. I find that it does help me. Being around the nature helps me a
Yes.
lot.
Yes.
Going to the gym, because exercise also, it releases a good hormone called serotonin, and that actually improves your mood. So that helps you to be able to cope with stress as well. Exercising, as that can also help you with your mood, and also to um, you know have time to laugh with friends or family if you can. Laughing as well. And it looks funny, but
Mm,
just let's stop taking ourselves so seriously. When I just
mm,
realized, I've realized that life, when the Bible says all is vanity, it is really vanity.
mm,
One day, if somebody drops dead, give people the one you probably maximum 6 months, then everybody forgets,
mm,
and moves on.
mm.
So
Yeah.
life, but we put so much, we think that everything must be done here and now, and even the employers are not helping the situation. But if
Mm.
anybody dies, they'll literally put an advert out tomorrow to get the
Absolutely.
role filled. So we
Yes.
take on so much. So we
Mm,
need to slow down,
mm,
and as I said, the society is becoming over medicalized. We
mm,
doctors are playing a part in that,
Mhm.
and I think it's across the board, both in America and even the UK, with almost most Western world. They want the doctor to prescribe for everything. But some
Yes.
doctors are trying to push back and say,
Yes.
look, it's not all about medicine.
Yes.
Sometimes it's the background of what's going on in the patient's life. You need
Yes.
to look at what is going on in the patient, not giving them a pill for everything. Let's
yeah.
try and go back to the basics: eating
Yes.
properly, exercising, and mental health. But
Mm,
unfortunately, it's not easy to measure those outcomes. It's easier to
yeah.
measure the outcomes in giving tablets. So
Mhm.
that's why tablets are being pushed for a lot of things that do not need medication.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, quick question. How do you push back on that kind of situation? You
Right.
go to the doctor, you're complaining about certain things, and the first thing they do is prescribe. What can we say or do to change the doctors, or I don't know, in a doctor's office like that, to move them away from prescribing, to move them more towards like, well, can we find out why I'm having these symptoms versus treating the
Yeah, I
symptoms?
mean, it's quite challenging, because I think the doctors too, I mean, as a doctor myself, I think they're pushed for time. Like in the UK, we only have 10 minutes per patient.
Mm.
So we,
Mm,
we don't have that a good amount of time to spend with every patient to really unpack the bits of pieces of people's lives. We don't have the time. I think it's easy, and then the doctors too get fatigued. Sometimes when my patients come in, they want to bring three. I said, please, no, no, only one, because if you give me if you give me three, another person three, yeah, I'm a
Mm.
human being, so I'm just being honest here. So I think this is the thing,
so that even
especially
you,
in the
the
United.
doctor, you don't become stressed. So
Yeah,
that the
you
doctor
doctor will get
doesn't become
stressed.
stressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the doctor actually gets stressed as well.
Yeah.
Imagine, hearing people's problems. Three, this one, three, next one, three, next one, four. You say,
Mm,
"Ah, no, you can't cope. Let's go home." So I think this is the thing. I think the workload of the doctors and healthcare professionals is excessive as well. We've tried to push back in the UK, but it's because the funding is not there. So, we're having to do much more nowadays than ordinarily we were doing 20 years ago. So this is a big problem. I don't know how it's in America, where I think that Lola is speaking for America. But in UK, we are having to do so much more with much less. This is a problem.
mm,
But I would say, as a patient, you can always tell your doctor that, okay, let me try and um try at least the basics first, reduce weight or exercise, especially with blood pressure, things like blood pressure and diabetes. In UK, like we have said, first line treatment of diabetes and hypertension is losing weight and exercise. So that one you can push them back from prescribing, at least for that. I
mm.
do agree.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
There's so much. We have such an active, yeah, there's a lot of conversation that's going on. Thank you so much to our community for just talking about that, and we have people joining us that are from South Africa, and from Nairobi, joining from London, from Nigeria, from different parts of the US. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. And just because I want to make sure we take as many of these questions Tosi says, can you explain why this generation are super sensitive and quick to vocalize their mental health status? I don't know if it's Gen Y or Gen Z or which one, and everything else like that. And Dami said, very good question, Tosi. We need to be mindful of language. I wouldn't say super sensitive, but super aware of their emotional and mental well-being, or striving to be super aware. But, and I agree with Tosi and with Dami. And I think somebody was saying that, we have a generation now that very easily, I would hear them say, can I speak to you at this time? I have a meeting with my therapist. I have a meeting with my therapist. Number of young people that I say, oh yeah, I have a meeting with my therapist. I'm sure there's an older generation that's thinking, do they have a problem? Are they? But maybe they are onto something. Dr. Zion, what do you think?
Well, I think they are onto something, because, I guess our certainly my generation, we came from a generation. First of all, we grew up without our minds being bombarded with all the things that the younger generations have, had. So yes, we had stress, but our stress was more sort of dealing with day-to-day issues. Our stress was kind of more, if I can use the word, more localized, more contained, over things that to some extent we had some control over it, especially in terms of making decisions, So we now, segue into a new generation who have had that thing. They've had to navigate this very interesting line, So a lot of us were born in Africa. We came abroad. They have become, they're Black people. Certainly, I'm just saying that casually because all the faces I can see are Black, but also I'm aware that there are probably lots of other races watching this. But, they're straddling these different lines of, different cultures, different, how do I do this, and then with diasporan patients saying, you have to do a little bit more. You can't just, now that you're in a strange land, you have to push yourself a little bit more. So we've had a generation that have succumbed and have taken on that. I don't know whether I'll call it racial anxiety or, whatever it is. So they work, they've tried harder, they've pushed themselves, and we are coming from maybe a more resilient, a background with a bit more resilience.
Yes.
They have been exposed to so much, the average person who grew up in Africa did not experience racism until they could take it. And you're having young people who are experiencing racism as they grow. They're growing up with a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. There's so much pressure on them. Then when you add this whole wonderful social media that we deal with, you're a picture now where we're having a generation, where they're falling apart. It appears that they're falling apart. Certainly in our own world too, life was safe. There was a lot of safety in the world that we grew up in.
Definitely.
Now everything, people are living through a pandemic. We are experiencing pandemic when we're fully formed with young people.
I know.
Sometimes I look at them and I think, seriously, why did you take it there? It's a pandemic. It was awful. Thank God it's under control. But when a young person talks to me about the effect it has on them, and they talk about the deep anxiety, the fear, they on the fact that
a life was taken away.
They'll say, I don't know if the world is ending. Does that mean I'm never going to have children? I'm like,
Steady on.
Go there, they're saying things like, I can't believe people are just dying, and I'm like, what? Generations live through wars, but they're like, it's a war. They know it's a war. We didn't see this coming, So there's so much taken on that has just come into a place.
That's true.
Again, society is now a bit more accepting because we're now realizing that these are issues that have to be dealt with. What do statistics say? The most common health problem in the world now is mixed anxiety and depression. The WHO have agreed. There's no, equivocation about that. That's very clear. So people are paying attention to it. Governments are trying to, not enough, but they're trying to pump bits of money and so it's acceptable now to talk about your mental health. It's acceptable to, seek support. I guess, the way, and as you say, the jobs that some of these kids do, somebody was talking to me about, starting work at, I think it was 7:30 in the morning and leaving work at 2 a.m. They get paid for it. They get paid a lot of money for doing that kind of work. But I'm like, that's
I know.
crazy.
A very
That's
long hours.
absolutely crazy. That's not sustainable. You're
Not
going,
sustainable.
yeah, you're not going to live very long if there's any kind of, fault, because as we said, the whole body is something is going to go out of whack.
Yes.
And once
Definitely.
one thing goes out of whack, it's going to affect other things. Just
Other
imagine
things.
a wonderful computer or even a car. One
Mm.
thing is off, it's going to affect other things, and that's
Mhm.
what's going to happen.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that's on the physical side. On the mental side, yeah, it's going to pop out too. It's going to pop off in one way too or the other. So yeah, I think that's why there's a lot of it's coming more and more
Yeah.
just these days.
I love so many of the
Good
comments.
comments. Yeah,
And
good
lots
comments.
of it. I know there was a question that came in earlier on, but I think it's been answered that, how do you avoid going from acute, stress to chronic stress, which I think are some of the
Mm.
we're making about life changes, thank you, Lady Ayola had asked that life changes, knowing your
Mm.
boundaries. If it's, if you notice that you're constantly work, you need to have that conversation coming from, so tackle everywhere so it doesn't become chronic. And I know we only have, yes, Dr. Zan, go on.
Sorry, I wanted to say learning to use that word no.
No.
The fact that I
No.
can't mean I must do it,
Yes.
I remember when I first came to the UK, I used to think, these my fellow, British people, they're always going on holiday. Why do they always go on holiday?
Yes.
They're always going on holiday. They're always going on holiday. Now I understand why they're always going on holiday.
Yes.
From where I come from, you don't go on holiday. Holiday is I leave Britain, I go to Nigeria to go and look after my mother, to go and run out and sort all the things, all the issues, visit people. I
That's
don't
true.
just lie in the sun and just veg. And just, every holiday, even when you go to Dubai, you're shopping, it's always something,
That is so true, especially for our community. That is so true. Wow.
That's true.
Amazing. This has really been amazing. And I know that I talked about it before, but in maybe in 3 minutes, I just want us to and I'll maybe hear from, everyone from Lola and our guest doctors. The word is still in my heart that there's a strong element of this that, there's a phrase that I really like. Yeah. Okay, Dami's point, which is good. I'm sure that about social prescription. A lot of this points we've made, right? I found that whenever I'm stressed, one thing that helps me a lot is going for very long walks. I don't even realize it. I would go 8 kilometers. By the time I come back, I feel better. I've listened to a lot of things that have been a blessing to me. Ginika says, do you think there's a middle ground, a combination of the previous generation who could push through situation? Okay, where we are more engaged. Okay, the chat line is there's a conversation going on there, buzzing. I love it, and and it's true. But let me just round up with this word of fear. I love one of the for me it's a biblical word that encourages me, that says whenever I'm going through stress, I just hear trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. And it says and will direct your path. I found out that it took trust for me to, when I was stressed under work and I prayed about it, I wanted to exit. I was working in the bank, like Dr. Esther said, or in Canary Wharf. So you are absolutely right.
You're one of them.
And when I found time to just really go back and say, what's the root, and just deal with it, I sensed not to move, but instead, the person who, I finally ended up getting along very well with, she was moved. The composition of the team changed. So the work really changed, I found out that, certain things, when I start to deal with it, and when I find myself stressed and I start allowing that silent meditation, the root of it is fear. If I leave this, what would happen? So I have to keep playing at their rules. If I step away, what will happen? If I trust the Lord with this child and everything, what would happen? Sometimes we just want to be in so much control, we're not able to take a step back. So I'll just let Lola speak to just your experience, and then I want it to be personal. So Dr. Esther, Dr. Zion, Lola, just what are the things that when you found that the fear of the unknown could impact how you do certain things, or just trying to make sure everything is working together leads to anxiety? Just in maybe 1 minute each, what you have done that has helped you, and just your thoughts about dealing with this issue of fear and anxiety that leads to stress.
Well, I think we've said, here that, stress is inevitable. Stressors are going to come in various ways. And I think the most important thing, takeaway from me here is coping. How to cope with it is where the key is. What strategies are we using to cope with the stress that comes? Are we building in rest? I post on my social media all the time about rest and sleep and things like that. And it's me talking to myself, reminding myself that it's important for me to build these things in. Good coping strategies. The Bible is full of tons of scriptures that talk about rest over and over and over again. That's not by coincidence, because God, I feel like God knows that these things will come. And it's important that we build in rest into our system, because our body, I feel like the stress that comes in, our body gives us warning signs to tell us, like, you're reaching your fuel tank is empty. Start to address those things now. And we have to learn to listen to our bodies, listen to what our body is trying to tell us, and building those healthy coping mechanisms, like eating right, exercise, sleeping, talking to friends and family, not letting it build in our system where it now becomes such a burden that we feel like only drastic situations can solve it. So those are like my takeaways, and I'm telling myself this. It's a continual learning process for me, because I think as women, we have high stress tolerance. We think that it's a thing of honor to just be able to deal with. The higher the stress you can deal with, the more of a woman you are. And it's me continually reminding myself that I can't be all for everybody. Sometimes I have to delegate people to Jesus, refer them to the God Almighty.
That's true. That's true.
Hallelujah.
Yes. I think a last minute question still popped in. So with all of these last minute questions, maybe one response, how do we, somebody said, we get the guests to define, rest. So maybe as you round up, Dr. Esther, and we talk about, dealing with issues like fear, or like, Van said, rest. How would you define rest? Just your final thoughts on this.
Okay, my final thoughts on resting is to physically and emotionally detach from the situation that is stressing you. As I said before, nothing in life is, what can I say? All is vanity. When I keep on saying that, the things that look so terrible, if tomorrow we're not here, they will be done. They will be done. The company will carry on. People will do what they need to do. So no one should have that power to put you under any pressure, both employers or friends or family, because there are different type of these people putting stresses everywhere. So rest is I think is to take, to basically, first of all, put our confidence in God, and secondly, to detach yourself emotionally and physically from the things that are causing you stress. And I think by doing that, you discover that your life will be much easier. Thank you.
Fantastic. I love that. And I love the comment about Sabbath and about rest. Absolutely, it's true. It was wired into how I believe we were created. So that's important. Was that your final comment?
Final comment. I think for me, when I was going through a very stressful period in my life, I found some scriptures. I found he will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him because he trusts in him. And I actually bought the plaque, a little plaque that I used to look at all the time. I found, consider the lilies of the field, they neither toil nor reap. Consider the birds of the air. God is in control. God, at the end of the day, it starts with God, it ends with God. You cannot be God. You have to let God be God in your life. But as time went on, and as I became more and more of a therapist, I also realized that sometimes we have to develop the ability to take responsibility, to actually step back and look at what we can do and what we cannot do. We have to stop blame everything and everybody else for everything that's going on around us. We have to be very honest with ourselves and learn, when I'm not saying no, is it people pleasing? What exactly is going on with and then address it.
Yes.
Because without those things, yes, I could be exercising, I could be meditating on scripture, I could be doing so many things. But if I don't, at some point, I'm going to have to get to, if I really want to, to be okay, I need to get to the root of, I need to identify the source of that stress. I need to accept what my responsibility isn't about it. And then I can make the choice, make the decision, make a quality decision. Do I want to stay in this job? Do I want to stay in this relationship? Do I want to, what do I want to do? Where can I get to peace?
Yes.
So that's
excellent. Perfect. And I think Modupe gave us what would be a good reminder that we can all take away with us when we talk about the definition of rest: recharge, escape, serenity, time out. Excellent. My goodness. Thank you, everyone. This has been a beautiful first episode in our new season, When Life Happens. I want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Esther and Dr. Zion for all of the insights and for everything you shared today. It was perfect. It was beautiful. I'd like to thank everyone that was so engaged. I was enjoying, the commentary that was coming and from everybody. So please, we're back, new season. Join us for our new episode in When Life Happens on Saturday, June 24th. And we will be talking about what happens when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Come and hear some real life stories. Again, life is happening. We don't need to be afraid of certain things. We just need to be able to look at it, talk about, how we prepare ourselves for life and strengthen that. If you haven't, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Relationships with Adenike, or at RWA TV show on all social media platforms, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. From the rest of the ladies who are not here, but from myself and Lola, would like to say thank you everyone for being here and hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Bye everyone. Bye.